All right, we are recording. Well, I can't say enough about today's guest speaker. I'll give a brief introduction and I'll let her tell you more about herself. But I met Miss Romelita Harrison via an introduction, Reverend Kenneth Moore. Um, Anybody knows Reverend Moore, you know, he calls you when he calls you, and you might not get him, but he's gonna get you. So he reached out one day just out of the blue and he said, Fel, that's somebody I think you need to meet. You guys are kind of like-minded on some things, and I think you guys need to sit down and have lunch or something. So that's been getting close to a year ago now. And did have a wonderful conversation and interaction with Miss Harrison. Learned about some of her works in the communities, including a children's book that she's going to show to you all in a moment. And I said, you know what? This only makes sense for what I do in this space, which is try to elevate and bring people to the forefront that have something to offer for us to learn from as a collective. So we had lunch. Well, we hadn't had lunch yet. That's crazy. We actually interacted. You came to the holiday social, and I met you and your husband, and we had great interactions over the course of the last few months. And this was actually one that was scheduled, I believe, for February or March.
April. April.
April, scheduled for April, and life happens, but here we are. So glad we could make this makeup happen and spend this quality time with Miss Romelita Harrison. She is an author, a theologian, an intellectual, an activist, and very engaged in the community and very much in favor of the uplift and positive progress of the young people that exist in her purview. So, without further ado, Ms. Romelita Harrison is here to discuss history, literature, our youth, and the spirit of America. So, take it away, Ms. Harrison.
I'm sorry. Before we start, hi everyone. Could you let Dawn in, Felton?
Oh, am I? I don't see her.
Um,
You know what? I had scrolled away from it. Thank you so much, Tango. I had scrolled in the wrong direction. My apologies. I had
uh-huh.
scrolled away from the top. Sorry about that. Miss Harrison, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Felton. It's so wonderful to be here. And like you said, we connected about a year ago and we've been talking ever since. And it seems like we have known each other forever and longer than that. And I have been attending the RELC chats at lunchtime. And I just am just enthralled with this space, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I must put the disclaimer out there, and I told Felton this earlier, that I am very, very camera shy. I am just not used to talking in front of a lot of people. And so I don't know that I'm apologizing for that, but I do want you to know that up front. And because I'm a writer, and I don't do a lot of talking, I do a lot of writing. So I wrote my thoughts down. And so I hope that will be okay. But I do want it to be engaging. I don't want it to be where I'm just talking. It may seem like that for the first 20 or so minutes, but I do want to give you an opportunity to jump in there and share some thoughts. So as I'm talking and sharing, write down some of the questions or some of your comments that you might have. And then when I'm done, then we're going to entertain that. So I do believe in the Socratic method. And as a former educator, I love to teach that way because I feel like I love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner, and I feel like I had just as much as I have to give, that there are people who have something to give and to share as well. So, who am I? Well, I'm a mom and I'm a wife, and my husband and my daughters are the joy of my life. I'm deeply, deeply attached to promoting and celebrating equal human value. But the real essence of who I am was shaped a long, long time ago as a little girl in Newark, New Jersey. Long before I read Dr. King or engaged Howard Thurman, the soil of who I had become, who I would become, had been fertilized and tilled in the Black church faith tradition and the environment and experiences of the Black community. I grew up in the predominantly African-American city of Newark, New Jersey. There, I was nurtured and sustained in the traditions of people who were descendants of slaves. I went to church all the time. I love church. I went to the Mount Vernon Baptist Church. I matriculated through an African-American elementary school. And I had the opportunity to go back there about 2 weeks ago, and I had not been there since the 70s. But it had been a lifelong dream of mine to go back because I knew as a kid that I loved to write. And I always wanted to go back someday and read to the children. And I got that opportunity about 2 weeks ago. I went back to my old school, and it's still there standing. And the children were wonderful, and they let me read my book to them, which is where I come from. And here it is right here. And I want to talk a little bit today about what inspired me to write it in conjunction with the topic history, literature, and American youth and the spirit of America. Felton did that. That is a mouthful. So yeah, so I got to go back, and like I said, I always dreamed of going back, always wanted to be a writer. I didn't know any writers growing up. I did run into Amiri Baraka every now and then in the chicken shack, but I really didn't talk to him about writing or anything. You all know who Amiri Baraka is. And as a child growing up in Newark, I never realized there was such a thing as racism. My world was insulated by the people who instilled in me that I was a child of God, and the converse was rigorously impressed upon me that others were as well. And from that vantage point, the nucleus of my person would be formed to become the catalyst for the way I move in the world, the way I engage the world. Love, hope, justice are essential to my faith. They inform my work as a chaplain and as a humanitarian, my coursework at Duke and seminary, and the corollary teachings of Jesus Christ are indistinguishable in theory and in praxis. This intersection has served to undergird my vocation, and it is evident in everything I do. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd lay pleading for his life, and the need for love in this world was never more apparent. And there was a course being offered at Duke in seminary. It was called The Politics and Ethics of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I pleaded to be admitted into this class because they didn't really want me to take it, but I really wanted to take it. And it was just the most profound blessing for me. Reading his words, contemplating the depth and weight of their meaning remains invaluable in speaking to the sorrow of racism that continues to bear fruit in our country today. We know that there can be no reconciliation in America where love does not abide, and there can be no path to freedom or justice or the beloved community without that. I am the founder and director of the Leadership and Service Ambassador Program of Rockingham County. I started this program 10 years ago as my personal response to counter hatred and racism, because I felt that if there are people who can put evil in the world, then certainly I can put something good. My studies reinforce that God cannot be invalidated. I could clearly see the Imago Dei in all of humanity because God can't be invalidated. And the corollary premise is that life, the life of every person, has value and worth, and my validity in the universe is undeniable. So I acknowledge and I accept that I'm going to spend the rest of my life working for the beloved community. The leadership program that I started embodies the teachings of Christ and Dr. King's vision of America as a more perfect union. For me, again, going back to that little girl in Newark, New Jersey, and why I wrote Where I Come From. Growing up, the word slave to me was just a word. It didn't really have any real meaning or attachment to my person. They were just an entity in time, and I didn't really have any knowledge or understanding of their lives or what they experienced. But then one day in January of 1977, Roots, Alex Haley's epic saga about an American family aired on television. And for the first time, I understood. I understood where I had come from, because that series humanized me in ways that I had not been before. It made the enslaved flesh and blood. And in this portrayal, I saw my connection to my bloodline. I saw Kunta Kinte was my family. Kizzy was my sister. I realized that I was tethered to these people, to their strength, to their love, to their humanity, that my ancestral family had lived and breathed in this same world that I now draw breath. And from that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about Kunta, about Kizzy, about where I came from. The story was formed. It was impressed and held in my spirit to tell one day. And it is upon those whispers and those dreams of my ancestors that I've been guided to share this story. And that's how I came up, well, one of the reasons why I came up with where I come from. When I read about or listened to a commentary about Ron DeSantis and what he was trying to do in Florida, I said to myself, why do we need permission to tell our history? Why do we need permission to learn our history? I don't need your permission to do that. And so I set about that I am going to write the story of where I come from, and I want to tell it in a way that little children can understand and embrace it. And it was really inspired by a poem that I had written in a book that I wrote called, it's a book of poetry and prayers called Conversations in Lavender. And the title of the poem is called Memories of a People, and I want to share it with you. Our eyes forever hold the photographic negative of the ships that came like a pestilence in the night, canvas whipping like black capes in a tempest storm. We stood in the silence, helpless and numb to the true meaning of the moment. We watched the millennial of them sail away into the midnight of the unknown. A trail of crimson lay adrift in the swell of the sea, carrying the winds of a glorious aria, billowing the cadence and blue scent of the beautiful bodies gone past the horizon where the tide drops away. Their ghosts hover ever near to us. Their wails toil in the hills. Tears that bear the names of lives lost fill our buckets with the sorrow of a people wrapped around and tethered in time to the sacred, precious memories that linger in our minds. So I wrote that, and from that, I sat down and I thought about what our ancestors wanted to say to me or say to us. And so I went to visit a couple of plantations before I wrote the book, because I wanted to hear what their voices were going to say. So I went and I walked the grounds. I stood in the slave cabins to see what they spoke to me. And what I learned was that they didn't want us to be ashamed of them. And this book was written with those in mind who've ever been in a space where the subject of slavery was mentioned and their faces felt flushed. And I'm talking about, I know this because children tell me all the time. And my two daughters, whenever the subject of slavery would come up, they would want to just slink down in their seats because they felt so ashamed and they just wanted to disappear. But this story chronicles the journey of the enslaved from the shores of the great continent of Africa through time in America, and it honors the grace and strength of their lives and advances the story to see their humanity and their unacknowledged and profound contributions to American history. Where I come from honors the memory of those who never knew liberty and whose contributions have been buried and eclipsed by the sorrow of their circumstances. Because a lot of times when we talk about slaves or the enslaved, we don't talk about what they gave. We talk about the abuse. And not that those things are not important, and not that we should not call to remembrance what was done, but they were so much more that they gave of themselves. They were people with hopes and dreams and gifts that were taken from them and given to America. And what they said to me those times when I walked those premises, that they wouldn't want any of us to feel shame when we consider their lives. They would want us to see the best of who they were in the most arduous circumstances. They built a historical bridge to connect us to their legacy that declared that they were so much more, and through their strength, we are too. They would want us to know that they didn't leave us just pain. They left us their strength. And I'm reminded in Greek mythology that there's a character named Sisyphus. And Sisyphus is punished because of his deceit and his hubris, and he's forced to roll this boulder up a hill for all of eternity. And this enchanted boulder, when it gets to the top, every time it rolls back down. So Sisyphus is doomed to repeat this task of rolling the boulder up the hill for eternity. And what I get from this story is that this task is laborious and futile. And the story also tells us that humans can't cheat the natural order of things. They can't become immortal like the gods. So how do we heal something that we didn't cause? I believe we do that by naming it, by telling the truth, even if it hurts. To release its whole, you have to you have to name what was done. You also start by listening. And as we discuss this connection between history and literature and youth and the American spirit, we have to begin with the foundation. And history forms the foundation of this nation. It gives us the context for the present and a roadmap for the future. And when we review the historical narratives from the nation's founding to the civil rights movement, they reveal the values, the debates, the sacrifices, and the people who have shaped America. The American Revolution is a key example. While history books detail battles and treaties, and literature offers a deeper understanding of the human experience during this time. These historical accounts provide insight into the ideals of liberty and self-governance. Literature such as the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, allow for the exploration of arguments, the anxieties of the people living through that period. Literature can be a mirror for us, and it can be a guide. It reflects the nation's evolving values and beliefs, through characters and narratives that are crafted by writers. Our young people can connect with the struggles and the hopes and the dreams of those who came before them. Stories like 12 Years a Slave and Uncle Tom's Cabin and Gone with the Wind, Up from Slavery, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, To Kill a Mockingbird, can reflect the American experience and the spirit of America. It explores the challenges and the triumphs, offering unique perspectives on issues that have shaped the nations. From early colonial writings to contemporary works, literature has both reflected and shaped our values and provided deeper understanding of the human experience within the framework of society. For example, the Harlem Renaissance, with writers like Langston Hughes in Mother to Son, and James Weldon Johnson's The Creation, or Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, celebrated Black culture and highlighted racial pride. Their works challenged Americans to confront their prejudices and paved the way for future activism from students like Diane Nash and John Lewis and Schwerner Cheney and Goodman. And stories like Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman question the pursuit of the American dream and its impact on families. These literary works resonate with readers across generations, reminding everyone that the fight for social justice and equality is an ongoing, continuing narrative. Youth are the future of the American experience. They are inheriting a complex nation shaped by centuries of history, interpreted through countless works of literature. And it's all of our responsibility to provide them with the tools to understand that inheritance. History and literature offer valuable avenues for our youth to engage with the past and inform their future, because you can't just stop history. You can't just erase it. It's still going to go on. And the phrase that we want education, not indoctrination, the word indoctrination, there seems to be some kind of belief that exposure equals indoctrination. The problem with that is that it undermines the ability of our students and our teachers to be able to discern in their own thoughts, to process information, and through their own intellect and their own wisdom and intellectual curiosity and inquisitiveness, come to a conclusion about how they feel about what they're taking in and what they're consuming. This is what education is supposed to be. So to make an assumption that exposure to a particular piece of information automatically means indoctrination takes away the human ability to consider for themselves completely out of it. Access to diverse stories and narratives provide a frame of reference to understand the world. I had a friend say to me that she had read, when she was growing up, she had to read Gone with the Wind. And she said that the story, she just cried all throughout the story. And she didn't understand why, because these were all these white people doing all this stuff. And why was she crying? Because of the humanity of it. It connected her to the humanity of the people. And I remember when I got older, I had this connection to Scarlett O'Hara. I don't know why in the world that I just adored Scarlett. For some reason, I just think that I liked her her tenacity and her I'm not going to take no for an answer attitude. And so I didn't realize till later on, maybe I'm not supposed to like Scarlett. Um, but I did. So it's important for us to have these diverse stories and narrative, to have an understanding of the world, to cultivate not just our own experiences, but to be able to see other people's experiences as well. So engaging youth with diverse historical perspectives allow them to connect with those who have shaped the past and understand their own potential to impact the future. And so what I realized with teaching young children and children, I taught high school history, but I feel like if children just go through school the way that they have, for 12 years and you never see anything about yourself. You don't know anything about yourself. And when you do read anything about yourself, it's in a position of inferiority. I don't think that that is helpful. It sends a message not only to the children who are descendants of slaves, but it sends a message to the children who maybe happen to be white, who are reading, who see themselves doing all these great things. And it makes an impression on them as well in a positive way and also in a negative way. So we do want to bridge historical events and literary themes to contemporary issues to empower our youth to see themselves. So when I wrote Where I Come From, I wanted children to see. I didn't mention chains. I didn't mention floggings and whippings, and not because I'm trying to sanitize slavery, but I want them to see the best of who we were. I want children to see that these were carpenters and engineers and horticulturists and doctors and veterinarians and nurses and architects and all the buildings that they built, you know, the White House and Duke Chapel, that is such a landmark there in Durham, and people go there to have weddings and all of these wonderful lofty services, but many people don't even realize that it was an African American person who designed that building. And so I think it's important to have those things for people to know about, for our children to know about, so that they feel that they have a place in our culture and our society, that they weren't just the enslaved. We want to provide access to diverse voices and perspective, ensuring that young people learn about the experiences of all Americans, including marginalized communities. When I was teaching at Reidsville High School, I used a book entitled The Americans, and it was a wonderful book because it brought in all of these different voices of all these people who contributed and shaped America. And I think that this provides a more rigorous and comprehensive understanding of the nation's history and challenges our young people to think critically about issues of race and class and gender. I remember distinctly one time teaching, and a young man raised his hand and he said, "Miss Baker Harrison," he said, "America has done a lot of bad things." And I didn't tell him that. I didn't say that to him. But I think in teaching, he saw that for himself. I didn't need to tell him that. You could see the good things that we've done, but he also put it together that we're not all that we say that we are. So the American spirit isn't solely in textbooks or in historical buildings. Freedom and equality and opportunity form the core of the American spirit. And the American spirit also isn't static. It evolves and it adapts to meet new challenges and societal changes, as seen as in movements in the civil rights movement and LGBTQ plus rights. And sometimes it eludes us. It's something that we dream about and we put down in parchment, but for some reason we just can't get all the way there. And we know that we can't get there because we saw people being enslaved for 250 years. We see the mistreatment of people. So, but the American spirit lives within all of us, in our actions, in our aspirations, in our willingness to engage with the world. And by fostering an appreciation of history and literature in youth, their understanding of the nation's past is enriched, and it empowers them to live this American spirit that we're aspiring to. Our ancestors will want us to know that they were more than just whips and chains and bondage. They're asking us to embody their resolve and their triumph, and they're begging us to heal America. God did not shed his grace on us for us to roll a boulder in perpetuity. America was never meant to carry a curse. We were meant to break it, to heal it, to transform it. Father Richard Rohr, a Jesuit priest, said that pain not transformed will be transmitted. It will show up in other ways, and we see that in our nation. And in my opinion, this is how racism continues to operate on this level. We're a bridge between what was and what could be. We are the ones that our ancestors prayed for, the ones that they were fighting for. We're their legacy, not just their wounds, but their strength. And when we heal, we don't free just ourselves, we free those who will come after us. When we read about and listen to the words of the people who came before us, those people who didn't get a chance to speak, we're trying to understand them. And that's what the lessons are about. It's not trying to make somebody's child in a classroom feel less than, not a white child and not a Black child. But we can't heal what we're not willing to look at. We have to make a decision about what we want in America, and not so much to end it, but to begin it. And so I wrote this book because it was time. It's time to have the conversation in America about the contributions of various people, Asian people, all the people that did the work. And it does not help us to keep trying to erase it or to hide from it, because it doesn't go anywhere. You press it down in one place and it comes up in another place. And so we're doing our country a disservice by continuing to sweep it under the rug and not acknowledge our history. And though it be painful, it's painful for all of us, but we're all in it together. And so that's what my thoughts are on the spirit of our youth and our country, that we do them a disservice when we try to keep the truth from them. And as we can see, all of these years that have gone by, and you know, we are celebrating Juneteenth in just a couple of days. The war ended in 1865, and those people found out that they were free on June 19th, 1865, a few months, after the death of Abraham Lincoln. And here we are, still trying to fight for freedom. I don't know how many of you will celebrate Juneteenth, but I celebrate July 4th. But we're still fighting. And I just don't think that has a place. Discourse, yes, but fighting and vitriol and hatred, I don't think it has a place in a country that stands on the documents that we have laid forth as our foundation. Thank you all for letting me share today. And I'll take any comments or questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. I'm going to read a quick quote that I think is very timely and connected to what you shared and everything that you imparted. And if you have comments or questions, please raise your hand and I'll get to you. But I want to read this quote, and it was one that came up Saturday at our gathering. That I think is just is spot on with our presentist position versus where we could do better. It's quote, progress far from consisting in change depends on retentiveness. When change is absolute, there remains no being to improve and no direction is set for possible improvement. And when experience is not retained, as among savages, infancy is perpetual. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Um, Oftentimes people know that last part, about repeating the past. But there's a lot of Sisyphus inferred in that as well. This repetition, this constant fight, this doing the same thing over and over. This
Rolling the boulder up the
up the
hill.
hill. Yeah, that was when I was at UNCG beginning the PhD program. That was one of the things that was referenced in terms of teaching. You're repeating this process. You keep constantly rolling this boulder. But for us as a nation, that has to stop. At some point, the progress has to be noted, referenceable, and continuous. And that was a large part of our conversation about that adherence to some positive progress. And I'm grateful to make some with you today. I'm so glad that you were able to do this and to share so much of what you have been I will say burdened with, but it is a good burden to bear when you desire to leave things better than you found them. So thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I have stuff to say, but I think so do you. Tango, you came off, turned your camera on. You got something you want to put out there?
You, Tango.
Hey, Romalita, that is such a beautiful book. We actually purchased it the night of the the Living Wax Museum out at Parkview Village, and you took the time to autograph it for my daughter, and it means a lot to us. It's beautiful. I think that one of the things that really stuck with me when you introduced yourself and was telling a little bit about, where you're from, where you came from, is the fact that you went back to your school. And I know that must have filled your heart with so much joy. And
Yes.
I was just wondering, when you were there, are you seeing a difference between children, Black children specifically, now and then?
I spent about an hour and a half with them. They were in the second grade. They were very, very smart. And when I went to, it was Chancellor Avenue School. When I went to Chancellor, we could go out at lunchtime. We could leave. We could go home for lunch. We could run to the store and get an Italian hot dog. We could just do it, whatever we wanted to do at lunchtime, as long as we came back. And but the kids, they were so well mannered, so well behaved. Um, and I asked them questions if they knew any people who had been enslaved. And they raised their hands and obviously someone had taught them these things, but they were very, very well informed, even in second grade. They were. And I also read this story to children here in Reedsville. And I tested it out here at one of the elementary schools. When I first wrote it, I tested it out. And then I came back and I read it to all the grades in the school, except maybe the fifth grade. And I was surprised that the fourth graders were the most engaged with it. I was thinking it was going to be second grade, but it was fourth grade. And I think maybe because they're being introduced to history at that point, and when the younger grades are, it's just me, me, me. Um, but your question, if I saw a difference between the kids then and the kids now, you know, I went to an African American school. I went to a Black school. I remember sitting in the classroom and my teacher had people who were Black on the wall. And I can sit there and go, that's Dr. Charles Drew, that's Ida B. Wells, that's Booker T. Washington, that's W.B. Du Bois. I knew all of those people. There had to be like 50 different people of color up there. Um, eh, but when I came here, my daughters never got that. So we went in a classroom, there was no one that looked like them. When my daughter started kindergarten, I walked in the room, I saw all of these dolls that were white dolls. And I asked the teacher, where were the dolls of color and if she wanted me to bring some? Because my little daughter was a little girl of color. And she said, oh, I just brought my daughter's dolls in. And I felt so hurt because I was like, you knew my daughter was coming. And whether or not your daughter has Black dolls or not, you want to have a diverse classroom. And so I I did not see I didn't see a difference between me and when I was there and the children there. I felt like they were really, really smart, but I did see a difference between the children here and the children there. Not that they misbehave, but in their knowledge of cultural things in African American history. When I asked them about the enslaved, if they could name people, those kinds of things, I didn't see that same level of knowledge, and I didn't see the same level of comfort in the younger grades. But as I said, those fourth grades students gravitated to the story and wanted to know if the white children wanted to know if the book was going to be at the book fair, because they wanted to buy the book. And so I think it's how you introduce things to children, and expose them to it. And this is not something we have to continually hide, that these children can learn about these things in a way specific to their age group. But I did not see a difference between me and them. No.
Mhm. And it sounds like really what you noticed is the environment switch, the difference in environment. And I appreciate that. And the fact that our children here seemed less knowledgeable speaks to some information that isn't shared. Like you said, exposure is not equivalent to indoctrination, but exposure is necessary for intellect, for growth.
That's right.
So I appreciate that. And one other thing you mentioned was the freedom when you were there as a little girl to go to lunch, to go elsewhere and come back. And I think that speaks to discipline, but it also speaks to trust and belief in children. Some of my children have done everything: private school, public school, charter school, Christian school, a whole lot of stuff, homeschool. We've done it all. But one very distinct difference between the private schools that they were in and the public school was that the private school allowed more freedoms.
Absolutely. Thank
And that allows you to just grow as a person.
us. It does.
And I wish that that's something that was more better incorporated into our public schools.
Thank you so much. I
But
agree.
thank you.
I agree so much. Thank you so much for sharing that and saying those encouraging words. My daughter also, one of them went to private school and she went to a Catholic school and she went to public school. And she had so much more freedom when to learn. And she wasn't driven by grades. As a matter of fact, all the way up to fifth grade, they did not even give grades. And they wanted them to learn because for the sake of learning. And so, and she just learned so much about so many different things in the world. And they gave them assignments and tasks. Like when they got to like seventh, eighth grade, they had to learn how to go to a laundromat or to take the bus by themselves. And they gave them some money and told them where they needed to get to and sent them on, go, and figure it out, and I think in public schools, we just hold them so tightly and press down on them that you stifle them because you try to control the learning. And you don't want them to learn about certain things, and certain words are bad words. You don't want the teachers to be informed on diversity when you have a diverse group of students and their culture is different and their backgrounds are different and they're experiencing different things, and you don't understand why they're behaving the way they are because you haven't been taught that. And then, the school board, shuts down any kind of diversity training, for them to learn about it. And again, a disservice. And so, but you make a wonderful point about, the difference between children in private school and public school and how much more freedom that they have.
Quick comments in the chat. You have a comrade from New Jersey who remembers some of that freedom that you were expressing about, and she talks about being a teacher for 20 years and being restricted in what she could teach. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. Jen, is that the right word? How do I say your name? What is that name? Janine.
It's Janine.
Janine. Thank you. And then Johnny asks, is there a reason why you switch between people of color, African American, and diverse when talking about the specific history of those who descend from slavery? That's a conversation you and I have had before, and I think we're just at a point where new information is new information, and how you process and grow in it is up to you. But yeah, if you want to respond, you can. But I know you and I have talked about that aside.
I use them interchangeably. I know that some people today don't feel like they have any connection to Africa, and they prefer to be known as just Black. And there was a point where I didn't like being called Black. And I prefer being called a person of color, but then some groups don't like person of color. So I just use them all interchangeably. I don't really have an affinity to one or another. I just use them all. And sometimes I'm saying African American history and sometimes I'm saying Black. But
And so much in my purview speaks to the nuance and the elusive identity, which is a big part of what I focus on in my studies and in my my energies with my dissertation and my academic focus, there's an elusive identification factor, and it permeates in all our discussions about Black American life. Um, so I often am consumed with just attaching that specificity to everything that we discuss. And again, you and I have talked about it, and it's at the heart of my work. So I'm grateful to have people who gravitate towards that mindset. Appreciate that question, Johnny. I have a question, if unless somebody else. Oh, Paul, you off mute. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Romalita, thank you so much for your remarks, which are quite beautiful and hopeful. I guess I have a darker personality or something. But I wanted to pose to you a question. When you were talking about education, it seemed that sometimes you were referring to the powers and the habits and the trends in the educators. And other times you were talking about the capacities of the children. And those are two really different things. And the trends that we're seeing now are so, to me, so obviously unhealthy and wrong that I would like to talk just a second about your view about what the capacity of children. We have Black History, which is a Black History Month, which is I think, a very important counterweight to the kind of every month is White History Month, and the Black history tends to be neglected. But we not want to get to a point where we have just one history, a shared history. And I've thought that for a long time, but I have real trouble visualizing it being presented to children. You want, at a very young age, you want to give them some positive information. You tell them about the farm animals and you introduce them to civics and the founding fathers, and then by and by you let on, yeah, well, there weren't any founding mothers. Sorry, didn't get around to that for another 150 years. And then they get to slavery, and yeah, slavery was pretty bad, but that's a long time ago. We don't do that anymore. At some point,
But we do.
you want, as you said, you want to present positive things. And you're recognizing some really positive things about Scarlett O'Hara. And yeah, that's true. The enslavers, who are some of my ancestors, they did some very bad things, but they had some good qualities.
Enslavers are some of your ancestors, and some of the slaves might be some of your ancestors too.
I don't know that, but I have reason to believe that I've got some cousins out there who I've never met. But what do you do with a kid in your class? You've got some kids whose ancestors who are Confederate soldiers, and that's a point of pride in that family. Maybe the child doesn't know a whole lot about it. You've got another child whose ancestors were enslaved, and that is perhaps a point of pride in that family, but certainly it's something that child may be aware of. Then you get to the history, and how do you teach that to a child, that you could have people with decent qualities who are actually fighting to enslave these other people and to keep them down? It kind of makes my head explode just to think, how do you deal with that with children? What's your experience with children? How do they react at what age can you do that?
Yeah.
That's a horrible question, but if you could just talk about some of those things.
That is a very, very a powerful question, because you have all of these things that are tied into it. But you start with the very, very basics. And one of the things we teach children when they go to school, they start to learn, they learn My Country 'Tis of Thee. They learned the anthem that they sing, America the Beautiful. They're learning all these things about America being unified. And so we can start there with just simple basic things about being one nation under God. So you don't jump in there with bullwhips and plantations necessarily, but you can start with things like unity and what we're supposed to be, because that's what the words of the founding documents, or if you're looking at the Gettysburg Address and you see the words and the language of what Abraham Lincoln wrote there are ways to start to introduce the students to the historical things of the country, aspects of the country. And just like how you said that I have all of these ideas and stuff, but I didn't wake up that way. I had to process those things for myself. And so that's what children will start to do over time. And some of the things they will fill in the blanks for themselves. And as they continue on in their matriculation through school, hopefully someone will teach them. And so you mentioned the Confederacy, and then you mentioned someone being enslaved, but they know right from wrong. And people who are holding on to the Confederacy, are you really holding on to the pride of your ancestors? Or what is it that you fear? What that you would want to, if this is one nation under God with liberty and justice for all, just because somebody wants to hold on to it doesn't necessarily make it right. And we take like the Confederate monuments. You're erecting a monument that's hurting someone else. And so you feel prideful about this, but this person enslaved my grandmother. And so when you have conversations and you're willing to sit down and work together, because I do think that we have the mental acumen and the intellectual ability to sit down and come to a curriculum that's designed for each grade level. But we won't have that conversation. We just refuse to have it, because I believe that when you do things that you know are wrong, you don't want people to bring that up to you. You don't want people throwing those things up in your face. So you rather not talk about it. You rather just put it somewhere or hide it and pretend it didn't exist. But the thing when you do that, it shows up somewhere else because because you keep doing bad stuff. Not you per se, but you keep doing bad stuff. People keep doing bad things. You want to be exonerated of the heinous and the trauma of that has been inflicted on a people, but then the trauma continues to be incited. So it's
Please go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I did not mean to cut you off.
it's okay. So I think that there's a way to do it. And I think it requires dialogue and coming together as a United States, and to put together a curriculum that will address those things the same way they went into that Constitution Hall and they didn't all agree on the same things, but they sat down and they stayed in there until in the sweltering hot. They didn't let any reporters and all these different people in there in 1787. They went in that room and they stayed in there until they figured it out. And I think we have to do the work, but we don't want to do the work. We haven't done the work. We need to do the work. And so what that looks like, I don't necessarily know, but I do know that it can be done, but we won't sit down and take the time to do it because one group is too ashamed and too hurt by what they've done. And so they want to put it to
It's 1 o'clock.
So a quick comment. I think that carries a little weight in regards to Paul's question, and Romelita, hopefully I'm adding to your response. One of the things we fail to do when we talk or teach about slavery is to truly prioritize an understanding of it being an institution in business. It was a fixture in this country. It was a fixture in the building of this country. We often lend any mention of slavery to the original sin, this unfortunate circumstances, the thing that is the black scar on the soul of America. So we give it some almost magical thinking and some unfortunate energy of mishap and misunderstanding, and we did not recognize each other's humanity and look at how much better we are, as opposed to understanding the financial considerations, the idea that the South desired to maintain this element of free labor um, for the riches it provided to so many. Um,
It
we
was
we often
enshrined.
miss it. Yes, it was codified. It was protected in the Constitution. The Civil War was all about the Southern states saying, "Hey, they're not protecting our interest in slavery as they said they would," without saying it clearly, because slave is not in the Constitution, as many of us know. Um, Johnny has a question, and I know we're getting up against time, so I'm going to ask this question to you, Romalita. And if anybody else has anything they want to add, just be ready to unmic and say it. Is there any age that's too early to tell children the truth? In some instances, we can start with the name of schools, streets, highways, military bases. Tell who these people are and what they have done, and how these schools and streets get the names.
Wow.
So when should we start informing young people of the world around them and how it got to be this way?
I think in small doses, I think as early as when they can read. I think that we can start to introduce them when they're able to read. Um, they're not stupid. And when all your friends don't look, you don't have anybody that looks different from you.
I think in your very early children's books, there can be some inoculation for what comes later, maybe.
Yeah, you can start to lay the groundwork of what this country has looked like.
Yeah,
And
I
what it,
agree. Formative years, and making it just a normalization of information as opposed to something that's jarring or disconcerting
right,
for
because
so
the
many.
trauma of that stays with you.
Hmm.
It stays with you, and you're afraid. You become afraid because you're seeing these white people do this to Black people, and it may not be intended, but you grow up with that.
Yeah.
And that impresses upon children, just the same as not putting any contributions of what people have done in the history books. When you just totally erased out of there, like you didn't give anything to America. So people reading the history books, there you're going to school 12 years with these kids and you didn't give anything, because the books don't say you gave anything. You didn't do anything for this country.
Yeah.
But we did. And so that's all along the way, the same way you're teaching all these other things, you have to bring in all the other people, all the other Americans.
No, I totally agree. There's plenty of blind spots we could illuminate. Tango has a comment in the chat I'm going to read, and then Dr. Freeman, I'm coming to you. I think you have something you want to say. Black children and other children born to oppressed people are born into truth. Likewise, no child is born racist. Racism, discrimination, and prejudice are taught from birth. Absolutely. Proximity matters, and what your environment is so matters. We know that.
Absolutely.
Um, uh, did you want to say, I think that he just dropped off. He said he has to jump off. I'm sorry. So he said, thanks so much for sharing. Have to jump off on another meeting, but this was great. And he really appreciates all that you shared. So, yeah, this has been great. And I'm grateful again for you to, be able to make time. And all that good stuff. And Tango, you have an unborn godchild. That's a great godchild that I already read. Yeah, you got to start early. Read the books now. Like that is the truth. The that inoculation that Paul just mentioned. There's just a super importance to that environment already existing, the ideas that you want to be shared, to be consumed, to be the nurturing environment for that young person to already exist. It doesn't need to be found once they get here. It needs to already be something that they're walking into or being birthed into. But no, I'm grateful for
Yes.
you all and the time. And Romalita, I'm giving you the last word. So thank you
I
all. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add that in Germany, you know, where the Holocaust took place in some of those places there, I've read and I've been told that there's this huge monument there, and everybody knows why it's there.
Hmm.
Nobody has to explain it. They grow up with it.
Hmm.
They grow up knowing the history of that. And so I think that people are afraid because they feel guilt by association. And that's because you can't, you know, if I say to a white person, name me 5 abolitionists or name me 5 people who fought for civil rights, can you do it?
Mm.
And perhaps if there were people who you understood that were not on that side, that were championing for causes of equality, then you could align yourselves with those people instead of naturally feeling some affinity to someone who was a brutal slaver or who just owned people. But we don't have that opportunity to allow people to do that. And I think that's why the discourse is needed. That's why sitting down at the table and having the conversation rather than just taking a pen and codifying into law that we're not going to have AP history that includes this, this, and this.
So much of what we're experiencing is steeped and connected to the failure of Reconstruction. And that's a different conversation that we need to continue. Paul, thank you so much for your presentation earlier. And we will have more conversation on that in the coming months. J.R. Powell has a question that I think is worth us ending on. So, Romalita, I would love to get your thoughts on this question. What impact will robotics and artificial intelligence have on racial discrimination? Seems like it might mitigate against I got some stuff on my okay. It might mitigate against the need for some to discriminate, subordinate others. Very interesting question, and I don't know that that is anything that is answerable outside of maybe looking at a movie like Terminator or something crazy, something that's predicting the future. But I have at it, Romalita.
Um, yeah, you will have those things, but you will still going to have humans around. And as long as you have humans around, you're going to still encounter this problem. You cannot heal. The last thing I leave you with, you cannot heal what you won't look at.
The great observation. I totally agree that there are some places and spaces that we can do better, that we actually need to do better. And important in that is uh, looking at our real history and real past collectively. Paul, you had a comment you wanted to get out before we get out of here?
Very briefly, my fear is that artificial intelligence will really has potential for making for crystallizing, solidifying racism right in place, because as it currently exists, it's based on this huge databases. And if the databases have racial prejudice in them, then the output of the AI is going to be racist as well. So I think there's some real danger there.
I don't disagree with the programming that these things are going to be basing their future influence on being problematic. But to the point that Romalita just made, and I think that's what gives us the ability to shift that narrative. The people are still here and still involved, and we have to be the disruptors. That's why I like books over things on internet, because man, they that can change, and that can be changed at some point by artificial intelligence deciding what now makes sense for our society based on all of the information and data it is basing its recommendations on. But anyway, I'm not a tech guy. I'm a here guy, and I'm in the present, and I'm with some wonderful folks right now, and I'm glad that we were able to pull this off, Romalita. I knew it would be this great. We'll have to do something similar again because there's so much more to talk about, and your knowledge is vast and appreciated. All hearts and minds, I appreciate you guys showing up and showing out. Thank y'all so much for
Thank you, guys.
participating today and sharing your lunch break.
Thank
Look
you.
at Tango with some kind of innovative effects.
Oh my God, Tango, look at the hearts.
Somebody showed us something because
So
there was you didn't.
cool. Tango, you're gonna have to show me how to do that.
I have a lot of kids, but all you do is go to your little react button, and at the send with effect, you see the heart that says send with effect. Romalita, send me something. There you go, Felton.
Appreciate y'all.
I need a remediation class.
Bye,
And
guys.
look, I'll get this sent out soon. Also, we have some other good stuff coming up, so just keep an eye on your email, and hopefully you can make it to something in person or just be around for the next lunchtime chat. But I'm so glad to share the time. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
bye.
Thank you for coming
Bye-bye.
out today. Bye.